Good evening, everyone. Tonight is a meeting of the South Kingstown Planning Board. The date is Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. The time is 6:30 p.m. Our first agenda item is roll call. Susan Axelrod.
Here.
Liz Carp. Here. Paul Jordan.
Here.
Robin Pothier.
Here.
Caper Wilson.
Here.
Armand Monaco. Here. And Maria Mack is here. Our second agenda item is approval of minutes. That includes July 21st, 2026 Planning Board Work Session minutes and July 28th, 2026 Planning Board Regular Session minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from anyone? Hearing none, would someone like to make a
wait,
motion?
hold on.
Oh. No?
I was going to say motion to approve.
Okay. We have a motion from Paul to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Caper. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Next agenda item, under subdivision and land development projects, extension request, greenhouse dispensary. Is there anyone representing the applicant? Just turn on the, yeah.
Hi, yes, my name's Ken Tetzner. Questions? Or,
Good evening. Can you just explain to us the reason for the extension request?
sure, I'll give you the Cliff Notes. So it was completely out of my control, obviously. The state ended up getting sued by 3 out-of-state entities, which ended up in federal court, and they put a halt on the whole lottery system to hand out the licenses. So they now have rewritten the bill. It's wide open again, and the lottery will be in January. That being said, I think we're up in December, so we need an extension to keep going.
Is there a specific time frame or limit on extensions for these types of facilities?
So, my advice would just be to follow the 1-year extension practice that you have for other types of applications.
Very good. Any questions from board members? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion from Caper, a second from Paul, to extend this application for 1 year. So that would be,
Is it a year from today or a year from when it expires?
good question, a year from today or a year
We've
from when it
typically
expires?
granted a year from when it expires.
Which is,
I wrote it in the memo,
December.
December 16th, 2027 would be the new expiration date.
okay.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
December 16th, 2027.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously.
Great, I appreciate it, thank you.
Next agenda item is 2001 Kingstown Road, minor multi-household land development project. And this is also a public hearing. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman. For the record, my name is Jeff Caffrey. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Resnick and Caffrey, 300 Centerville Road in Warwick, Rhode Island. We're here tonight as a kind of a continuation from our last meeting, which was back in July. It's a minor multi-household land development project looking for preliminary plan approval. At the last meeting, we had the testimony of the project engineer, Josh Klein, as far as the various machinations that we went to come up with the design that was before the board last meeting. We also heard from the project architect, Jason Moon, and I know that the board had a couple of questions and/or issues with the project layout. Since that meeting, we've kind of reworked the plans. We actually spoke with Mr. Rabbit just prior to the meeting and came up with what I think would be a nice alternative layout for the property. It's my understanding that that a set of the architectural plans are made available to you. Have you seen them?
No.
Oh, you haven't seen them?
They'll be updated this
Okay.
evening.
So basically what we've done is we've enhanced the portion of the property that's fronting on the road. So I know the board's concern was that it was blank at that particular point in time. So we've enhanced that with added some windows and a bow window to make it look a little bit more, a lot more appealing, actually. And so we're hoping that's a proposal that you folks would be comfortable with so that you can move on and get final approval. I think they're just going to be loading that up there, and happy to answer any questions once it's up there.
So Madam Chair, just before we potentially have a discussion on building and orientation to the street, are there any questions on site layout or parking or landscaping, why Mr. Wagner has those plans on the screen?
I know that there was, at last meeting, there were some questions from DPS, wondering if those have been resolved.
I believe Mr. Conboy has been satisfied with regards to stormwater drainage on the site. Is that correct, Mark?
I felt that the comments could be taken care of at the permit level for the stormwater, soil erosion and runoff control permit.
So Brian, if we can swap screens. So first, I'd like to thank the applicant willingness to work with the planning department as well as the planning board with regards to how this development interacts with Kingston Road. You know, it's part of a special management district. There are some standards associated with that. And again, they have made efforts to kind of meet the needs of the community and be a little more compatible. When they initially submitted their plan, this was the elevation you saw from Kingston Road. I don't think, lack of a better term, it was not necessarily well received. And again, the applicant's team worked hard on trying to address that. Sorry. The change to that was potentially the top right, where they looked at doing a front entrance and rearranging some stairways and having it address the street a little bit more. But it made it potentially less attractive on the garage side, because you no longer had a covered entry for the garage, you no longer had some architectural and fenestration on that southern elevation. So what I looked at is the possibility of adding architectural elements to the street-facing elevation, which is the bottom left, and that is a color rendering of that, incorporating a bay window type with bracketing and fenestration, looking at changing materials and architectural elements in the gable, adding true aprons and skirts to the window settings, and then, you know, just changing up that feature. And then you can see you have the porch column feature and covered entry on the right-hand side of the elevation, which would be the main entrance to the house and the garage side. Again, just a pen and ink rendering of what that elevation looks like, comparison between where the applicant started and where we're potentially proposing today, a enlargement of that, and then that would be the garage side or sullen elevation, where you still have those main prominent entry features. You have gable porch coverings with porch columns. There are bump outs for gables above the garages. I know the applicant's architect has, in some of their renderings early on that we've reviewed, added bracketing to those gable bump outs, so it's, again, another architectural feature. Sorry. And again, we're looking at the eastern elevation facing the 3 townhouses in the back. It'd be a mirror image of what would face Kingstown Road. The original proposal was a completely blank wall. Looking at the townhouses, sorry, to fit that on the screen, this one is a slightly protracted in its width, but again, matching a slight variation of architectural style and potentially using some color variation so it doesn't look like a repetitive pattern. And again, that building, just what's called the blue hour, it's at a dusk or dawn setting, showing how it's lighted from the inside. Again, back to what you would see from the southern approach and the Kingston Road side. Are there any questions? I know I ran through things relatively quickly. And
Go
again,
ahead,
here are
Susan.
all 4 sides of the elevation of the duplex.
So one of the plans that we were given shows navy blue and dark gray and dark brown. Has this new color, lighter color scheme, is that acceptable to you than the dark colors?
Yes, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
And certainly aesthetically, it's much more attractive and appealing, I think, from the road than the original plan, and represents a pretty good concession on our behalf.
So I was the one who gave you a hard time about that, so thank you
I
for...
recall that, yes.
Yes, so do I. So thank you for addressing
Sure.
that. I mean, really, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And again, Madam Chair, I'd like to give credit to the applicant's architect, because my ability or our ability as a department to react to the elevations is their willingness to move off of the original blank wall. So it's actually their work that made our work better. And I do have one printout that I can pass around. Does anyone have any questions for me at the moment?
Questions, comments?
Sorry, so with the addition to this, the changes to the building, has that changed the landscaping around the building in any way, or any other site changes besides the appearance of the building itself?
No, at this point in time, nothing else has changed, just the architectural layout of the building. Sure.
Other thoughts from board members on any aspect of this? Susan?
Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
So on one of the plans, you're showing that the stone wall that's out front will be preserved, protected. That is on the plans. Is that indeed your plan, and it looked like it sustained some pretty good damage when the lot was cut? Will that wall be repaired? Like, what are your plans with that stone wall that's out front?
Is that the intent, that we're going to repurpose the wall? Yeah, we're going to repair it and reutilize it. The wall. Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you're not reusing it in a different location on the site, you'll keep it out front?
Correct.
That's great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We can make that a condition as well,
Yeah, it's on the plans.
still.
Yeah.
Anything else from staff at this point?
The only item would be in any favorable motion if your intent is to approve the site plan with the modified architecture. Again, giving some flexibility. I talked to the applicant that, the windows are showed the renderings. So final architectural elevations for building plans will steer that final size of windows, final placement of windows, but again, you have the architectural theme that they would adhere to.
So you're saying they won't necessarily be the same plan that we have seen this evening?
They will look the
Same
same,
design.
but whether the window is 42 inches wide or 44 inches wide, again, they have some placement and wall and mechanisms they have to adhere to on their on their interior site layout. So I want to make it clear that they will follow the thematic elevations, but there may be some slight movement of windows.
It would be in substantial compliance, if
Yeah.
not complete compliance.
If there are no further questions, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Hearing none, would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing? Motion from Liz. Do we have a second? Second from Robin. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We do have a motion that begins on page 5 of 6. And there have been some revisions that date to August 17th. Jamie, does that date include these drawings that we've seen this evening?
Madam Chair, just give me a moment, I'll add a sentence or two.
Yes, Madam Chair, I updated that to include the
Very
latest
good.
revision
Thank
dates
you.
on the plans.
As far as the stone wall that was discussed a little bit earlier, is that something the board feels comfortable adding to the
Conditions? Yeah.
conditions? So Jamie, you can figure out the appropriate language with regard to the stone wall?
Yes, give me one moment. Right, Madam Chair, if I may, in addition to the language prepared in the project memo, 2 additional items. The applicant shall submit final architectural renderings that are consistent with the architectural renderings submitted by Planning Board staff on August 8th, 2026, and made part of the record as it relates to the duplex and triplex exterior fenestration and color palette. Next item is the applicant shall add a detail to the site plans depicting the reconstruction of the stone wall, including dimensions and material. Final details shall be reviewed and approved by the AO, Administrative Officer.
Anything else anyone wishes to add to this? Would someone like to make a motion to approve this item? And this begins on page 5, memo.
I'll do it, but I'm not sure. It's been a while. I don't know which parts of this I need to read and which I can just refer to.
Well, if you read the motion and then make a reference to the number of findings and the number of
Okay, that's what I thought.
conditions
Okay.
as amended.
So, motion, South Kingstown Planning Board hereby approves the application for preliminary plan approval for the 2001 Kingstown Road Multi-Household Minor Land Development Project for a 5-unit residential development located at 2001 Kingstown Road, Wakefield, Rhode Island, also identified as Assessor's Plat 32-4, Lot 21, Ashworth Investments LLC applicant. Approval is based on the following materials. Findings of fact 1A through E. Conditions of approval, I think we're up to 11 or 10 now? 1 through 10? 1 through 10, conditions of approval.
Actually, 11.
11.
Two
Jamie
additions.
added 2.
Okay, conditions of approval 1 through 11.
We have a motion from Paul. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Caper. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Just a matter of clarification, 2 matters of clarification.
And just
I know you
restate
closed-
your name.
I'm sorry, Jeff Caffrey, for the applicant. I just want to be sure that we're all talking about the same architectural plans that Mr. Rabbit submitted tonight, that those are the ones that we're going to be in compliance with. And the other thing is, in your conditions of approval, there's verbiage in there that the plans have to be in strict compliance with what was submitted, and I think we agreed that it would be in substantial compliance. So I don't want to get into a situation where, again, if the window size changes a little bit, that we have to come back in front of the board for a modification.
So, Madam Chair, if I can address that, the language is strict compliance, but the condition number 10 would clarify that the renderings provided to the planning board on August 8th by the planning department staff, that the new renderings submitted by the architectural team are consistent with those elevations prepared tonight.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Anything else? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. No. Our next agenda item is a recommendation to the Town Council, zoning map and text amendment, the Peacedale Preserve Special Management District. Is there anyone representing the applicant?
Yes, members of the board, Madam Chair, Patrick Doherty here on behalf of BWJW LLC. And I'm here with Mr. Pimentel and also Molly from Dupree Engineering as well, if you have any additional questions or concerns. We have a little bit of a background presentation over the development of the latest revisions that were submitted by Mr. Pimentel. If you'd like to hear from him as to how those were arrived at and how we backed into these numbers. Oh, yes, I mean, he's already submitted a comprehensive report about that, but there's also been a supplemental, I guess, a revision to the proposed ordinance that was worked upon in conjunction with the architect and discussions with staff as well.
So, yeah, Madam Chairman, so Eric Zwayner from ZDS couldn't be here, but we forwarded to Mr. Rabbit's attention the revised architecturals and layouts. So what we did was we took the information and guidance provided by the board and moved certain improvements around and created a greater distance, setback distance from the Frizella's property, and then we oriented some of the improvements in front of other improvements for buffering purposes, such as, for example, putting the pavilion behind the building and so forth. I did forward it to, like I said, Mr. Rabbit's attention. I hope everybody got a copy of Mr. Zwainer and Molly's work. So then I met with them, I took all that information, and then added that to the ordinance, because I know the concern was, we've been hoping that what we can do is craft an ordinance that will force whomever develops, we believe it's going to be us, but even if it's somebody else, they will be required to develop in accordance with the plans that we submitted. So what we did was we locked in setbacks, we locked in maximum length and massing and scale of buildings, quantity of buildings, the positioning of the buildings, et cetera, and then incorporated that into the ordinance and provided to the attention of the board. So we don't know if there's any further, if you want to go over it on a bullet by bullet requirement, if there's something else you want us to tighten up.
Planning board members, do you want to hear in greater detail their idea of setbacks? Although I do have a concern that since this is a special management district, getting to those kind of specifics may not necessarily be relevant on a
Madam Chair, if I
request for zone
can make a
change.
suggestion.
Sure.
As you mentioned, this is a special management district. There are multiple layers to this district. Mr. Pimentel in his submission has testified to that. Council has testified to that. So I want to say there are a couple components to it. So you have an existing outdoor shooting range. You have an existing indoor range. Those are there. They're presently operating today. The text amendment and map change is requesting that they add, in essence, 3 additional components into that mix. And that would be the rental type units, whether they're called short-term rentals, whether they're called timeshares, but they're a short-term type ownership rental opportunity there in a cottage-like setting. There is a sports kind of clubhouse that's part of that component, along with a wedding venue. Then the third component, again, I combined the clubhouse and wedding venue kind of into 2, but they're sub-components of each other. The third item is the autominimums, and we use the term autominimums, but in the language, it's clear that it includes storage of boats indoors. It includes potential wine collections and other types of art collections. So, but it's not contractor storage. It's not intended to be mini storage, and there is no outdoor storage permitted in association with those units. So those are kind of the 3, again, rental units for residential short-term stays, autominimums, and then you have the clubhouse and wedding venue. So I'm sure there's some planning board members who may feel that the wedding venue and the clubhouse kind of country club type setting are separate components. So again, you could look at it as 4: rental, residential, clubhouse, wedding venue, autominimums. The last thing that's still out there is residential development. The regulations talk to single-family, duplex, and multifamily. And I know the planning board has been very concerned about allowing increased density of development in the commercial nature, with the applicant wanting to still hold on to all of the density that would be allowed, in essence, in the underlying zone. And I'm sure there'll be discussion on scalability of that. Staff has made some recommendations to you, and the applicant has stated in their kind of revisions that if the outdoor gun range remains in any way, shape, or form, there is no single-family, multifamily, duplex residential component. For a residential component to occur, you would have to abandon in perpetuity any outdoor shooting component. Again, that still brings in the 3 to 4 uses, depending on how you categorize them, because you have the indoor. And then I know the planning board has said, well, if the indoor is still there, some of you feel that you shouldn't get full 1 acre density on the remaining, because now you basically get your underlying R40 zone, then you get commercial condominiums, then you get a wedding venue, then you get rentals, and you get an indoor club. So I'm sure that will be subject of discussion and debate. I think the applicant's fully aware of that layering, and Mr. Pimentel and legal has done their best to try and represent their client on the structure of that. It's just the comfort level of the planning board on those density aspects to this. So I'm available for questions.
So when we envisioned the development, we envisioned with the proposed new uses, as well as the existing use of the indoor shooting range. Who knows, someday maybe the indoor shooting range will cease to function as well. But the vision in this approximately 14 acres subset of the property was the indoor shooting range and the amenities that we think will be somewhat independent, but we think will also blend well with the shooting range. So it was kind of a dual. You know, you'll have memberships who can take more advantage, and some of the components will be independent. Like, for example, the cabins can be rented without having to be a member. Exclusive of that, you still have quite a considerable amount of acreage, which a good portion is being used for the outdoor. So we understand you can't utilize that or those resources while you have the outdoor. If the outdoor should ever cease to operate, and we would utilize that for residential, then we would extinguish our grandfathered rights of the outdoor shooting. But it's still at the 1 acre density of land area deemed suitable or upland resources. I mean, we're talking over 100 acres still of viable land resources, some of which is constrained and could not be considered for density purposes, but that's into the future. But this is like a subset of the property, is how we envisioned it. And we did note in the updated ordinance that we would gladly give up those rights to that should we go in a different direction with residential, and we would cease operating those. And one cannot be pursued until the other one is ceased or given up the rights to.
You're only talking about the clay shooting element.
Anything to do with outdoor shooting, yeah.
I have a question about the text, if now is the appropriate time, or it can wait.
Well, I thought it might be useful because this is not only complex, but it is a text amendment and zoning map change, so regardless of what images we were shown or the ideas that this applicant has had, it really comes down to what it says in the text, so that this owner or a future owner could really...
So the only concern I have, this is page 5 of 9, section 610.8, residential land use density, 1 unit per acre of upland resources. So in the future, would we envision 1 acre house lots there? Or could we constrain this to say, yes, you get the density, but we're looking more for single duplex townhouses? I guess I'm thinking a more compact development that saves kind of the maximum amount of open space. You've got the river there. You got a large farm just to the northeast, I think. So I'm just curious about what...
Can I offer an answer before you get an answer from staff? So that's why we kept all of the...
I'd actually prefer the answer from staff first, if that's okay with you.
All right.
So the way the regulation is written, they have proposed 3 components to the residential development. And again, that's single family, duplex, and multifamily. There is no regulatory requirement that they have to choose one versus another.
Oh,
So
I'm thinking a mix of all
to your
three.
point, if you pass the regulation as it's written today, they could choose as an applicant to utilize their proposed 1 acre density, and we'll make it simpler. If it's 100 acres and it's 1 acre, or not even 100 acres, 1 acre density, they get 100 units.
Right.
They could choose to build one building with 100 units in it and do something with the balance. You would assume it's open space or recreation or something, but literally the regulation wouldn't prohibit them from doing it. They also could choose to do a 100 lot subdivision with 1 acre lots, and then variations in between.
So I guess my question is now the time to put in something more specific about that, or can we not do that? I mean, again, what I'm looking for is, yeah, you can have the density, but do it on a smaller footprint. Save as much of that vegetation and natural space as possible.
The role of the planning board is not necessary to reconfigure all the text, but to make recommendations to the town council. So again, you have some suggestions from staff, which go to Mr. Pimentel's comments today about structure, that if you have the outdoor shooting range, there's no residential component. I took it one step further and said if you keep the indoor range, you have a reduced density for residential. Once the indoor range goes away, then you can increase your density for residential. I didn't discuss the format of residential. And again, they left their options that, it's single family, and I'll correct myself, it's single family, duplex, multifamily, and then flexible frontage design. So again, they have that option to do a cluster. I strongly feel that with the town's incentive zoning, the way they're written, that requires 25% to be affordable with a 99-year lease, may push a developer towards looking at a comp plan, not necessarily to increase density, but to get more design flexibility, where they could come in and say, there's 100 acres, 100 unit density. I want to put all of those units on quarter acre lots in a village setting.
Right.
Our regs don't allow that, but a comp permit would allow that flexibility.
Okay.
The trade-off would be 30% affordable and a 30-year minimum restriction on deeds.
I think that Paul was also asking, correct me if I'm wrong, that since you can condition a zone change, is there language that could be added as a condition that would then steer the development toward a smaller footprint?
I mean, I'm thinking, Scott Millard, Dodson and Flinker, conservation design principles, yeah, I've got 100 acres, but I could put
Right.
I can put 100 houses on 20 acres and have a lot of forest left
So
over.
I guess that's also a question for legal. Is that an enforceable condition that can be part of a zone change special management district?
Could you reiterate that condition?
I think so. I guess what I'm saying is conservation design. What I'm talking about is you've got 100 acres, you've got density for 100 units. Conservation design says you put those on the 20 least sensitive upland acres, and then you save your wetland buffers and your river buffers and your forest. So you're saving a lot of the land rather than building on it just because you can.
So it would be like a cluster development.
Yeah, cluster is one of those terms that I don't like to use anymore.
Yeah, it's
Clusters
more
are
modern,
Okay.
Conservation is-
smart growth, conservation-oriented type.
You could,
Beyond the
May I
cluster.
just interject something? We're looking to preserve the underlying zone as well, because the industry and outdoor shooting, the government in Rhode Island is really taking a negative impression of that. And what we'd like to do is preserve the rights to the R40 as well, and we don't want to give that up. Obviously, if we come before you and we want to do any kind of enhanced development.
I think we're approving a lot here, and so I think a few conditions. I mean, you get the density. You're not really losing the number of units. We're just asking you to do it in a way that's more sensitive to the landscape and the environment.
Oh, I understand that, but any development of the property, I think, would be looking to do that to some extent anyway, but we're not looking to restrict into that in this ordinance. Obviously, in your report and recommendation to the town council, you're free to put whatever you want in that. But again, from my client's position, we're not looking to restrict our rights under the R40 in any way. Because if shooting ceases to exist, if the gun range goes by the wayside, there's a beautiful piece of property out there. Obviously, if a developer comes in and wants to do something with that, the underlying zone would allow for that already, and you're looking to put further restrictions on it. We're happy to hear whatever you have to say. We've been here a number of times. We've been working extensively with staff throughout this process. We're showing a lot of cards as to what we're doing here, obviously, and going to great lengths to show more and more detail as we come in here. But again, on behalf of my client, we definitely want to preserve whatever rights are inherent in the R40
I appreciate it.
zone.
Nevertheless, I'll stick with the request, and if the...
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to be upfront with the
Yeah, I
board, obviously.
I think it might be useful to sort of get a sense of how board members feel. We have a fairly lengthy number of additions that Jamie has put together. And this is a somewhat complex request, so I'll start. I think that this application is asking for a lot. The fact that they want to be able to put in essentially an event space along with rentals on a specific location within the site, that doesn't mean that that could change or a future owner might do it differently, but I don't have as much of a problem with having the events, again, with some guardrails put in so that this doesn't become a large commercial entity in a residential neighborhood. It's the addition of the residential in addition to the event space that concerns me. I have no problem with it being a sporting event type of location and build upon what is existing. And throughout this process, I've been a little concerned about some of the background information. I don't think there's been sufficient information given on the site. We have not had the any restrictions that were contained within the previous approval of the indoor gun range, nothing about site constraints. It's pretty well known that due to the Superfund adjacent to this site that many residents have had to have monitoring systems in their basements to detect methane gas. That continues today. There are concerns relative to that, as well as the fact that because this was a shooting range for many years, there is potential contamination in the soil that might impact anything that goes forward. Those are things that I feel we should have had greater clarity on. I worry that the cabins and the wedding condos essentially are, even if they are transient, so to speak, they are residential in nature. Some of the terms used, the storage unit, upscale, flexible, I worry that that's not defined in a zoning ordinance and that enforcement and criteria would be uncertain.
Could I just add, while you're on the storage units?
Yep.
Limited to a total of 70? We're looking at 28 right now, which take up Susan's saying no, would take up a big footprint, and we're saying we could have as many as 70.
Right,
We could go to 28 overnight cabin rentals?
right.
Yeah.
It
Yes.
seems,
So, I mean, I worry that that is basically a de facto self-storage because enforcement and that sort of thing. So, overall, I'm not comfortable with all of the uses that are being asked for in this. It's like I feel it's like double or triple dipping. You want the existing uses, you want to have an event facility, plus housing on top of that. In my opinion, it's too much for the site, and even though you have gone through the trouble of showing us some nice architectural drawings, this applicant or any future applicant, I feel that it's too much. That's just my opinion, but I want to hear from everyone else, because...
May I interrupt?
Go ahead, I'm done.
Just to follow up on something, I think you have been very good at sharing with us your vision for what you want to do on the property, but this has led me to be somewhat confused as to what exactly you're proposing in the zoning. You've been very clear when we did the site review of where you wanted to build, things that you wanted to build, but when I look over the materials, and I admit I could be missing it, but I sort of get the feeling that you could do these things in many different parts. So while we have looked at locations where you've identified for specific things, I'm really not clear on what uses would be permissible as of right in each of the locations. The other concern that I have, and I agree with everything that Maria said, and I'm very grateful that she went first because she did it far better than I could have. But I'm bothered as to whether we should be looking at a zoning change or not, because I think of zoning as identifying the kinds of use you want in a particular in an area, and really we're in an awkward position of looking at a particular property. And I recognize that this is unusual property, and so I'm trying to be open-minded about whether this is really something we should be considering as a zoning change or as a development plan of some sort. But I'm not clear on where the delineations are, and so as far as I can see, this is we can do all of these different types of uses, and I'm not sure where on the 122 acres we can do that. And I think that it's too big a space to have open-ended in that capacity. I'm also not clear about the storage units. I've heard them talk about it's going to be rentals. I've heard it talk about it's going to be condominiums. And it's an interesting location, but I'm not clear on what it is we're being asked to authorize. And it creates certain concerns to me about how we're going to monitor whether those uses continue to conform to the zoning that was approved.
Okay. Well, obviously, we're looking for a boutique storage, not roll-up doors and a padlock on the outside of that sort of thing. There's a very high demand for this type of a facility, and it's not a bare bones type of a.
I understand, but I don't see that in the permitted uses. I hear that whenever anyone describes it.
Well, perhaps a definition, a recommendation for that with it specifically defined.
How would you enforce that? I mean,
And
you have to have...
And what strikes me as odd about asking for a zoning change is really we're dealing with a broad request that covers multiple uses with a lack of definition. And you've been very good, you and your clients have been very good about articulating the vision that you see. But the vision that you see is not embedded in the zoning, and we're not being asked to approve a plan. We're being asked to approve a zoning change and accept that your vision is going to be implemented pursuant to your vision, and yet your vision also contains the fallback that if in the future we want to go back to residential and stop having the shooting range, we want to be able to preserve our density. And I'm just not comfortable. To me, zoning is where you articulate a an overall understanding for area planning. And it probably envisions multiple, I mean, here you're talking about multiple uses, but a single owner. And I really feel like the materials that you've given us are much more of a preliminary development plan that I'm more comfortable approving than I am approving a zoning change, which I think is extremely broad brush, ill-defined, and is asking us to make decisions that will affect the community for years. And you're preserving rights for a single owner that the community in the future might have differing views, because we're in a period of transition. So I'm not comfortable with the zoning request, and I'm not clear on, am I right in thinking that these uses are permitted on the entire 122 acres? I just don't have clarity. I don't have a clear distinction from what the zoning is outlining and what your client is envisioning. And your client has been very good at helping me understand what they're envisioning. And frankly, I'm much more supportive of what they're envisioning than I am of a zoning change at this point.
I understand that, but one caveat that is a guardrail on this as well is once development proceeds for any one of these types of uses in the buildings that we're proposing, that would prohibit the saturation of the site with, extra residential housing. We would be prohibited from using that because it wouldn't be available land area anymore, unless those structures were torn down and removed and replaced with residential housing.
I appreciate that, but that actually doesn't help me with my dilemma, because my dilemma is I think we're doing this backwards.
Well, that's why we came.
I'd like to hear from other planning board
Sure.
members, so that we don't end up with a back and forth.
Okay.
Anyone else? Robin?
I do too.
And Susan?
We were told early on in these proceedings that there was active conversations taking place about conservation land easements. So what progress has been made for that?
Well, as of the last meeting, Mr. Waugh had been speaking with DEM officials regarding the open space along the river that borders the property. I'm sorry, you couldn't hear that? As of the last meeting, Mr. Waugh had been having conversations with DEM officials regarding preserving conservation space along the riverbank and that buffer area over there. As of right now, I don't know what the status of those discussions are, but certainly they're ongoing. I know that. He hasn't told me that they're at a deadfall. But he definitely is interested in doing something like that. And obviously, we really can't build within that buffer area anyway, so it's I think it might be something that could be done. But again, we want to maximize whatever developable property that we do have on there, so that you can keep the options open going forward.
And the buffers that
Yeah.
DEM will impose are there automatically. I'm looking for something in addition to that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of property there, and some good things could come out of this.
Sure, I understand. I mean, but again, back to the defense of my client and the plans and the presentations that we've had at this board, we backed into this overlay ordinance in order to do what we've proposed and shown you to do. And I understand your concerns, and again, I just pity us if we come up here at a later date and try and propose building something that we didn't represent to you that we were going to build. I think we'd be shot down in a heartbeat, and justifiably so.
Moving along, since there's nothing more to tell us about that. Some of the wording in the text that Mr. Abbott has done a nice job writing up. I was concerned about the pavilion. Now, the text is saying the pavilion must be completely enclosed. I don't know whether that means soft-sided tent or a hard concrete wall.
Completely enclosed in a structure, no soft-sided tents. It's in a building.
Okay, and when I look at thank you for that. And when I look at the imaginary building there, it looks very much like just kind of a roof, like a picnic area, right? So it's got some nice-looking walls, but it's a lot of window. So if all those windows were open while the wedding was going on, I don't think the neighbors are going to get much protection at all from all that noise and light.
We did provide elevations and plans for that. I don't know if they could be brought up on here.
I saw them today, but it's a lot of window. It's a pretty structure, but it's a lot of window. And if all those windows are open, it's kind of like just a roof.
Again, I believe this is going to be heating and air conditioning inside the enclosed building with hard walls. And like you said, there are a lot of windows, but that's an architectural feature that they thought would be appealing.
So we might need some clearer text on, I mean, we've already discussed the fact that controlling the volume of music coming out of there is going to be difficult. I think some of the neighbors have already told us that noise emanates from that property into the evening, so wedding events could be huge, and I don't know if the AC or the heat is always on, or, I mean, weddings can get kind of hot.
Well, these are the things, I believe, that would be addressed and would be controlled by this board because of the levels of approval, master, preliminary, and final. We have a major land development that we would have to, for everything that we're doing on this, we would have to come before you. We'd have to do TRC, master plan approval, come back, do our engineering, prove to the board that we satisfied all.
I'm just saying that the picture of the pavilion you show now doesn't look to me like it would afford much protection to the neighbors. It looks like there'll be a lot of light and a lot of possibly open windows. I'll leave that on the table. And then my last question was signage. So there wasn't much in the document that Mr. Rabbit wrote about what would be allowed. So could we elaborate on that?
So in the zone they're in, they did not propose any additional signage associated with commercial type facilities. So the underlying signage would be what's allowed in the residential zone, which is very limited. Small, subtle, basically street address identifying the entity. No, McDonald's arches, no big signage that you would see along Old Tower Hill Road or one of our commercial areas.
Susan, and then Paul, and then Liz.
So one thing before I talk about my feelings on this, furthering Robin's question about signage, I had the same question because in your ordinance, it refers to the Route 1 Special Management District and says refer to that for signage. So I don't know if that's an error, but whatever the Route 1 Special Management District signage is, would be a whole different thing than this residential neighborhood on Rose Hill Road. So in that ordinance, it refers you to Route 1 Special Management District signage for guidelines. So I don't know, something's funny there. So I have a few thoughts about this project, and thank you for letting me share those. So I looked at our comprehensive plan, and a few things jumped out at me. One of them was in the economic department of our comprehensive plan is that future commercial and industrial development must not overwhelm the unique character of the community. It's right in the opening paragraph. And it is the guidelines that we run the town by. Future commercial and industrial development must not overwhelm the unique character of the community. And so I'm considering the different aspects of this project. And I am concerned about a number of things in this department, including, for example, traffic on Rose Hill Road. If you're having a wedding with 300 guests, we haven't seen a reasonable study about what sort of traffic is reasonable for that small residential road, Rose Hill Road, to accommodate 300 cars for a wedding. I don't know how you transport your $1 million high-end cars to their storage unit, but I don't think they're driving down Rose Hill Road. So if you've got tractors bringing in RVs and boats and cars and all sorts of things like that, we haven't done anything to accommodate the residents and the other uses, which is all residential, aside from the dump on Rose Hill Road. And so I was disappointed that there wasn't any address to that clear impact that will happen to Rose Hill Road if you have weddings and shooting range and storage of big vehicles and all kinds of things like that. And I'm also considering that you are in a residential neighborhood and you've got a house, which unfortunately on the plans, that area's been blurred. Like it doesn't exist. The house that's right on the property line next to your party tent has been fuzzed out on your plans. And I don't know if that was deliberate, but it feels a little underhanded to just sort of not address the fact that there's a home right next to the property line where you're putting your clubhouse and your party tent. And that to me feels like a pretty big assault on neighbors that live that close. So that's concerning to me.
With all due respect, I don't think that anything that we've done here before this board has been underhanded. We've identified where the properties, surrounding properties are. There are aerials that have been reviewed. The plans are out there, and my client has been overly inclusive in providing information to this board to address the concerns that you just talked about with traffic. That would absolutely be part of a master and preliminary plan approval for any of the uses or any of the construction. But I do take exception. I don't think it's fair to qualify my client or to portray them as being underhanded in any way, shape, or form when we've gone through exhaustive details with plans, shown you what our vision for the property is, had a site review. So I please would ask you not to characterize my client as being that way in any way, because I think we've been overly inclusive in the provision of information to try and show you what the vision is for this property. And all of those concerns about the traffic would be certainly foremost addressed at a preliminary plan at the very latest.
I just want to interrupt for a minute. You know, you keep making reference to at the planning stage, at master plan and preliminary. But once these uses are approved and the types of uses, the amounts, they would be allowed by right. So whatever comes forward in a master plan or preliminary plan, you would have the right to do that, to design that. So I think it's reasonable that planning board members are concerned and are treating this like the zone change special management area that you are asking for, not looking at a specific plan or photos that you've shown us. So.
Understood. So we were working that fine line of making sure that once we pursue a land development project, we can pursue uses that we're entitled to pursue, because right now these are prohibited uses. But at the same time, we also understand that the comfort that's provided a community and provided the board and provided the public is when you're going through the land development, you're showing a plan and you have to develop in accordance with that plan. So we were in that fine line. How do we get an ordinance in place so that we can pursue a development that we're entitled to pursue, because right now they're prohibited uses, and yet make sure that the board feels comfortable that when we come to the land development aspect of this, this is what we're concentrating on. The 14 acres, we're leaving the remaining land for residential purposes only. When the outdoor shooting should ever cease operating, we're pushing it back towards where the indoor gun range was and where the disturbances were, including the area that's already been disturbed for the upscale storage. The areas all below us are all zoned in either an industrial or if the areas that are contaminated have been rezoned in a government. It's all in my planner's report. So we looked at the comprehensive plan, we looked at the areas and the way they were zoned, we looked at the surrounding land uses, the areas already been disturbed and used for commercial purposes, and that's why we consolidated there, knowing that you're still going to have 100 acres zoned in a residential manner, which can only accommodate residential uses. And then we're trying to work through what would be appropriate for those 100 acres.
Again, we're trying to look at this in a holistic fashion, and this property could be sold if it gained approval for this new use. Somebody else could come in with a completely different vision that complies with all of the uses that are contained in this request, and it could be very different. So we need to think about that, and and what the actual language within the special management district would allow.
So
Sorry, Susan, I want to, let's.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Continue, sorry.
I apologize for offending you, but I'm also committed to expressing my uneasiness about some portions of this project. And I apologize if that's offensive to you, and I'm not trying to poke you or be offensive to you, but there are a few places here where, you know, the drawings don't really match the dimensions that we're talking about, where things like that issue with the neighbors just makes me feel uncomfortable, and I'm just sharing that there are some things that are making me a little uneasy about this. And I'm sorry that if that's
Thank you.
if that's offensive to you. I'm trying to be that way.
Match the site plan. I don't know.
The other thing that's in the comprehensive plan is that, in fact, the whole comprehensive plan is focused, whether it's land use or the economics of our town, is focused on promoting a high quality of life for our residents. And that also has been weighing on my review of this project. I think that right now you're asking for a very long list of uses for this property, and I feel like sort of a potpourri of choices that your buyer or your developer will have in the future. You've got single-family homes, duplexes, multifamily homes, boarding animals, outdoor shooting, indoor shooting, an indoor clubhouse with a kitchen, dining, bar, fitness, pickleball, and locker rooms, hotel, motel for more than 20 rooms, 70 upscale storage units, an additional 17,000 square foot storage building that we haven't seen plans for, an accessory entertainment party tent, and a restaurant with alcohol. That's a long list and a lot of things to get our heads around, and retaining the ability to put in hundreds of houses. And I feel pretty confident that if you brought us these site plans laid out with hundreds of houses on the northern part of the property, I feel I know how this board would have reacted to that amount of development in this space. But we all need to picture that development, because that's very potential in the future, that we have all of this and hundreds of houses on the northern part of the house. If you did a comprehensive permit, there'd be hundreds of houses on the northern part of the property. And so, you know, is this promoting a high quality of life for our residents? And I'm feeling pretty confident that for me, it doesn't fit those two vital portions of our comprehensive plan, both a high quality of life for our residents and that commercial and industrial development must not overwhelm the unique character of the community. So, thank you.
Paul, then Liz?
If this were a development plan review, I mean, I've had no real issues other than the sound issues for the neighbor. I like the project. I like what they've done with the property to date. I think it's a nice proposal. As Caper said, rezoning the entire property, I suggested a couple of weeks ago that why don't we rezone the 20 acres with this very clear vision of what you want to do? And I think all the confusion would go away. It's either that or we need to do a lot of tightening up of the text. I'm absolutely not comfortable with 70 storage units on that site. I mean, I don't know what the number would be, but I think it would be very clear if we said we're just asking you to rezone this portion of the property where we've shown you a very clear vision for what we say we're going to do and what I believe you're going to do. I see the potential there. It's all the other stuff. It just seems like too much all at once. And again, as Maria's mentioned, you know, all these by right things. Yes, we have a right to comment down the road. We'll get our traffic studies and whatnot in development plan review, but our hands are already somewhat tied. So I don't know if Director Rabbit wants to comment on that, or I know you didn't think zoning a portion of the property was the right way to go about it, so.
I guess in response to Mr. Jordan's comment, I think what Mr. Jordan's saying, we're kind of reorientate the discussion, that if you already had 100 homes on the northern portion of this site, and they were proposing to take the southern portion and do these uses, are you comfortable with that? And what I'm hearing Mr. Jordan say, I am, if I knew some of the development would be confined to the southern portion of the site. You could make a recommendation to the council that, non-residential components of this zone cannot be located X number of feet from the southern boundary of the zone, so that you confine that non-residential development, in essence, to the area they're showing you works conceptually that you've said you are comfortable with, minus the total amount of storage units of 7. That's what I heard from you.
Right, so potentially, whatever number of storage units, we could say potentially in the future, we're not going to have storage units across the street from housing. The storage units, all that's at the southern end. I like that.
You could structure a recommendation to the council that the non-residential components have a limited area within the 120 acres. And, you could pick that dimension based on their conceptual plan with some flexibility of them being able to provide utilities. I wouldn't pick a hard edge to their concept. I would go a little bit beyond that. But to, I think, Caper's point and even Susan's point earlier that, their concern is they're showing us things where we may be okay with it, but suppose a new developer comes in and says, I want to put the wedding venue in the northwest corner. Some of you would say, in hindsight, I would have never voted for this if I knew that would occur there. To your point, Mr. Jordan, I would have never voted for this if Autominion's ended up in the northeast corner of this site. Or more, 30 on the south, 20 in the middle, 20 in the northwest. But you would be able to make a recommendation to council limiting the commercial development of the 120 acres of this particular zone to a portion of the property.
And that would be an interesting question, because would that criteria hold up under a comprehensive permit application? Because most of our other zoning regulations have not.
I think, and council's here, but I think to answer that question as a planner, that the commercial aspect would hold up. But if someone proposed to not do autominums and then can't permit the area kind of set aside for autominums and propose residential, I think the laws in Rhode Island would potentially allow that. But you can't use a comp permit to put an autominum in an area that it's not zoned for. You can only utilize the residential side.
Liz?
I just wanted to add why I think this is so confusing to everyone, because what I'm hearing is that none of us can really visualize this or get our hands around it or understand it. And I think that it's because we're dealing with so many disparate elements. And I think when you have so many elements that both in terms of uses and in terms of their architectural expression are so different that it's very hard. Like if you look at the elevations of the storage units and then you look at the elevations of the clubhouse, I mean, separately, yeah, maybe they're okay, but in your mind, they don't feel like they belong together. And not even talking about the zoning right now, but just, I think all of us want to feel that there's a consistency to the development. And at least personally, I'm very confused by just the appearance and the layout.
Armand?
The only concerns I have is the extensive request for the uses. My personal feeling is that the event center is really not really tied into the original concept of the rifle range and the indoor range. The other aspects of expanding some of the uses in the building, I have no really problem with. But I do have a problem with introducing a totally different concept of the event center into this location. I really don't have a problem with the storage units because that utilization is not extensive. I agree with council that people bring their car or their boat, and more likely their car, but their car sits there. The car is not going to be going in and out on a seasonal basis. The kind of cars that are stored there, I'm sure they've looked at the storage down in Newport, and they can tell you what they've been told in terms of those. They come out once a year when he has the October concourse. That's when those cars come out, and you know. So that utilization in this area doesn't really concern me. It's the event center and the pickleball. And I know pickleball is a hot item, but like all hot items, they die because there's a new hot item that takes it over, and I can't think of it now, but there's already one that is starting up on the West Coast that is knocking out pickleball. So by the time we build it, pickleball will be gone here and the new one will be here. But those two uses are the only two uses I really have an objection with. As far as those units for overnight stays, I think it will draw people from out of state because they would come here and want to stay for the weekend and stay conveniently to the rifle range. So, like I say, the only two objections I have is to the event center and the pickleball court.
Thank you. So you can see there is not a great deal of comfort from this board with regard to this proposal. So there are two ways that I guess this could proceed. One is that it could be modified to have a greater degree of comfort from the board. It could be withdrawn, or we could vote on this and then you would proceed to the council regardless of what the outcome would be.
I think at this point, we would like the board to vote, and if you want to add conditions that you've talked about here, you know, as a backup in any kind of a consideration, if the council were to go forward and adopt this, we would like X, Y, and Z, just so you could give respect to the comments that you've all made here. But we've done a lot. I think the dimensions and the plans do match up. They were backed into by Mr. Pimentel and the engineering work that was done with the architect Eric Swena. And again, this is a vision, and this is a very unique type of. In 35 years of doing this, I've never had this much detail for a zoning map or a text amendment. It's a vision that my client is hell-bent on producing in real time and preparing a real destination and a gem in the town for recreational and other uses. So if you, respectfully, I'd ask that the board vote. Thank you.
And while we appreciate the level of detail that you've gone to, there is absolutely no guarantee based on what is currently in this draft that that's what, from you or another applicant, that would necessarily be the way that it goes forward. Just, again, because of the lack of restrictions within the text.
I do understand your concerns. I do.
And I feel very strongly that what you're trying to do is shift the burden of articulating all of the objections to us. I don't think this is, I think that your vision, I'm very supportive of your vision for the property. I'm not supportive of the zoning amendment that's been put put before us. And I think that it really is requiring, it's asking the board to articulate all of the concerns and place them within parameters in a zoning regulation, which I also don't think is the purpose of zoning regulation. So I don't like the burden being shifted to us, and I also don't think it belongs in the zoning as a whole. So.
Understood.
Jamie, are you working on text amendments, or, I mean, I guess we talked about, we need to set a number on the storage units, the number of cabins, and I like the idea of something like no commercial uses north of the existing indoor range.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, I've been diligently listening and writing notes, and I understand some of the positions, and Maria touched upon kind of options that you have. My concern always is if you just simply make, and I respect what Caper Wilson mentioned with regards to putting the burden on the planning board versus on the applicant. But my concerns, based on my experience over the years that I've been a planner, is if you just make a negative recommendation to the next step that doesn't give much guidance to that next decision-making board, being the town council, if they were to entertain adopting the regulation. It just says applicant came to the planning board didn't like the, and I'm oversimplifying this, planning board didn't like it, applicant shows up at a town council meeting, public hearing is noticed, and then they make their presentation to the council, and the council has to refer to staff, what were the concerns of the planning board, because you didn't articulate them. In most aspects, one of your options would be, even if you make a negative recommendation, and I think the applicant's counsel has said, negative, positive, or indifferent to that, they would prefer a decision so that they can get before council. Some of the things that I heard this evening, and if you were to make even a negative recommendation, I would put a caveat on that if the council were to entertain any aspect of this, we would appreciate you, one, restricting the non-residential components of this text amendment to the southern portion of the site based on the conceptual plans presented to the planning board. Two, eliminate the event center. And that could be a yes or no, but that needs to be consensus by the board. Some people say they don't have issues with it. A few have said they have issues with it. Limit the density of the residential until all gun operations are gone. And that's per staff's recommendations. Again, we suggested some density limitations until all gun operations are done. The applicant has already proposed some language to limit it only if the outdoor goes away. To Ms. Axelrod's point, reduce the signage to match the residential character of the neighborhood versus referring to another commercial zone in town. And then some of the discussion was require a percentage of the land utilized to be planned residential to be set aside as open space or conservation land. To Mr. Jordan's point, I'm okay with, in our example, 100 homes on 100 acres. I would prefer, and I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, I would prefer to see that density on less acreage and more land open or conserved. So 100 houses on 50, I'm okay with that. Mr. Jordan, feel free to correct me, I'm okay with 100 units on 50 acres if I can save 50 of that in conservation or open. And that gives a little bit of guidance to council if in any instance they're going to entertain moving forward with this. And again, we could add to that list. This is what I heard that potentially may have some consensus of the entire board.
I'm sure that in any negative recommendation, the board would be happy to articulate the reasons why and what the issues that we see would be with this, rather than just a blanket no. And that may give some guidance going forward, or it may create a different sort of application.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, you could take those 5 items and say the board is not in favor of this because they're concerned about non-residential uses, scattered within the 120 acres. They're concerned about noise and traffic associated with an event center. They're concerned about no limitation or minimal limitations on residential density with gun operations still in place. You're concerned about the reference to commercial size zoning signage in a residential zone. You're concerned about the density without any restrictions on conservation or open space. Again, it's how you choose to word that.
I think we all understand that, yes. And although I agree with Paul's assessment that it would be ideal if we were able to ask for in the future, if residential were to occur, that it would be a type of project where you have the conservation type model, where you had everything in one area and you had protection from the other. But perhaps then we should make a list, unless you would like us to continue this and spend a meeting really articulating this, so that when it's sent forward to the council, it's thorough.
So are we sure that we can't get to a positive recommendation tonight? Is that?
Caper?
No, I don't think.
Susan?
Nope.
No for me. Liz? Robin?
I think yes. I think we could get there.
Oh.
Right.
We divided?
1, 2, 3. We have 4 no's.
May I add something, just by way of example? What Mr. Rabbit was referring to and what Mr. Jordan was referring to and some of the other members of the board were referring to as well, some of the limitations that this board would like to see. By way of example, I represented someone in a comp permit, and there was a denial of the master plan. We had that overturned. So then there was a master plan with no conditions. We got a preliminary plan that was attempted to be denied. We got that approved. No conditions were stated at all. The town council, it's not by a straight analogy because those are appellate tribunals that were appealed to, but if you do put something in there that would be favorable, in terms of limitations, such as what Mr. Jordan represented or mentioned earlier, that would give the council some idea as to, okay, well, maybe something would work if we want to split the baby in half or do something like that. So I wouldn't have any problem with continuing for you to draft those limitations or whatever you want into your, if it's going to be a negative vote, then that's fine, but at least you would have those elements that were unobjectionable contained within that as well, instead of just a blanket denial.
So perhaps we can add to Jamie's list, and then that's something that he can work to formulate so that we can finalize it at our work session in 2 weeks.
Madam Chair, for clarity, is legal counsel proposing to grant an extension for 2 weeks of the planning board's work session to work on some language?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely.
So what we're envisioning, obviously, we got to go back to the client, right? It's his property. But what we're envisioning is there may be a lot of ideas put forth by this board that would work well into this ordinance. So we want to review them, make the changes if we can. Maybe we'll bring back an ordinance that's so drastically different. Maybe at least it's not a positive, it's a soft negative, and it's something more palatable.
Yeah.
That's what we're envisioning right now.
That's a tactful way to put it. All right, maybe we should go around. I want to add to Jamie's list. I
Madam
feel
Chair,
that
do you
we...
just want me to quickly review the
No,
five?
let us just add
Okay.
to your list. Insufficient information on the site itself, the previous approval and any restrictions relative to the indoor gun range, any knowledge or background with regard to the, any constraints on the site with regard to soil, adjacent Superfund use. That's the second one. The number and potential scale of certain items such as the condos and the difficulty in enforcement of those. I think someone said early on it was odd that they had a bathroom in them. How would this not become just your average self-storage? I mean, even if you call it upscale in your ordinance, what does that mean? Is that, how is that enforceable? What else? And just a better evaluation of site, and also with the amount of potential uses, looking at this in a manner that's more holistic in nature, so that you could get an idea of the actual scale. Someone else want to add?
Madam Chair? I think one objection, and I know I raised this last time, but I'll
Yep.
raise it again because I think it might be something that, that the 4 no votes may be interested in, and that's the statute that sets forth the precedence of approvals for projects like this that would require a planning board approval and a council approval, says, and I'll just quote it, where an applicant requires both planning board approval and council approval for a zoning ordinance or a zoning map change, the applicant shall first obtain an advisory recommendation on the zone change from the planning board, as well as conditional planning board approval for the first approval stage of the proposed project, which may be simultaneous, then obtain a conditional zoning change from the council, and then return to the planning board for subsequent required approvals. So, because this is a legislative process, there is a lot of room to kind of ignore the statutory process, kind of like how the General Assembly can have rules for passing legislation, but then they, end of the session, they don't follow them. It's kind of the same here, but a lot of the concerns raised by the no votes was, well, we just don't know how it's going to look in practice, and a lot of that could be solved just by following the procedure that's set forth in that statute. You file your first stage of the application along with your request for a zone change. You get a conditional approval and a positive recommendation for the planning board. Then you go to the council, and then you come back for the remainder of your requests. So it's just a consideration.
Thanks. And I think we're trying to look at the language in the special management request rather than their site plan per se, because that's really what counts.
That's what's before you now,
Yeah.
because there is no site
Right,
plan
exactly,
for now. Right.
exactly. I'd like to hear from other board members to add to Jamie's list.
I am very adamant about objecting to the wedding venue, party tent, music thing in the neighborhood. That is, if I had to cull something out of this project, that's, I feel, very inappropriate in a residential area. That part of it, solid sides on the building or not, to me, doesn't make a difference. I'm concerned about the size of the upscale storage units. each unit, if you do the math out, each one of those buildings is 17,000 square feet, and you've got 7 of them, so that's 117,000 square feet of buildings, plus all of that parking and driveway access. And they've never articulated to me how many acres of impervious surface that those individual storage buildings will be. I think it's a lot bigger than we are anticipating by looking at these plans, and I've never heard about how big it is, but I suspect it's many, many acres of pavement, and it's to me, it's excessive. They've never even mentioned that other storage unit, which is 17,000 square feet, that we don't have plans or designs or anything. I don't think I've seen it anywhere, but there's another whole storage unit that's not being mentioned that I would also like, I don't know, hear something about that too.
You probably want to also, when you're talking about the pavement, the runoff that would be created by the roofs.
Into the river? Mm-hmm.
It isn't really fair to say that we're generating lots of runoff and sending it into the river. We're not allowed to do that. Right, but it's going to be treated, I mean, effectively, there is no runoff. Well, I think it's a question for the town engineers, right? I mean, are we adequately treating stormwater runoff within a detention basin or not?
We'd have to have some sort of plan showing what they're doing to mitigate and treat runoff.
Right,
to
but I
know
mean,
that.
given a certain amount of impervious surface, you know how to deal with that. It's not like we're running roof runoff into the river.
Right,
Okay.
and understood that there would be mitigation
Yeah.
required, but just the,
I'm also concerned about traffic and the impacts to Rose Hill Road, which hasn't been addressed in this proposal. Thank you.
other thoughts to add to Jamie's list? Nothing?
So the event pavilion seems to be a real big question mark, because it's so poorly described that I really have no feel for what the neighborhood would be experiencing having that pavilion hold events.
Do you want to go now through the amended list?
Again, I have them, and again, I'm going to summarize these, Madam Chair, if that's okay. Restricting non-residential development to the southern portion of the site, potentially eliminating the event center, limiting density until all gun operations cease, reducing signage to match residential character of the neighborhood, requiring a percentage that is utilized to be residential to be set aside for open space. So basically you have an overall density, but putting that overall density on smaller lots. Requesting sufficient information to evaluate any prior constraints or contaminations that exist on the site. Looking at the regulatory aspects of enforcement for the operation and utilization of the auto condos / temporary storage units. Overall evaluation of the site criteria, size and scale of the auto unit should be reduced, scale and number of units to be reduced in an attempt to reduce impervious surfaces, and that can be addressed in multiple ways, and aspects associated with evaluating impacts to local roads. Again, that's a brief summary of the conversations. I have 11. I'm in that realm.
Is southern portion specific enough?
It was a summary of that. We would look at the conceptual plans and set dimensions on those. Potentially an acreage dimension as well as a linear dimension.
I think for me, there are two places where there's text in the comprehensive plan that is inconsistent with this project. Is that something that's aspirational or something that I want to add in?
You can state them, I think, and then we can evaluate whether they're aspirational or regulatory.
Okay. So the two areas that I was concerned with, one is the opening paragraph of the economic section of the comprehensive plan, which says future commercial and industrial development must not overwhelm the unique character of the community. And the other one is more general, where many places in the comprehensive plan, I saw text that indicated that we were focused on promoting a high quality of life for our residents. That's all over the comprehensive plan. So I can find you sightings for that, but that was just a recurring theme in the comprehensive plan.
And Madam Chair, with regard to those two items, those are somewhat subjective and difficult to quantify. I'll work with legal on language for that.
Anything else that needs to be added? Any other concerns that Jamie has not brought up? Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
And just for clarity, if we can have the applicant's legal counsel state very articulately for the record that they are granting an extension.
And I do want to, before we move on, there are some folks who are here this evening. If anyone would like to briefly state their concerns, even though you've heard quite a few of them from the board tonight.
Would you like my statement on the record that we agree to the 2-week
Sure.
continuance?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone who wishes to speak? Now's your chance. You're good?
You might have a taper.
Good evening, members of the board. Attorney Dana Ardente for the Frisellas, who are the neighbors, direct abutters at 129 Pearls Way. I don't want
Could you just spell your last name?
Yes, Ardente.
Thank you.
I don't want to belabor these points too much because the board kind of covered everything that I was concerned about. But the one thing that I wanted to point out to the board regarding the accessory entertainment and restaurant or bar, which would be the wedding function use, is that the applicant is attempting to propose this as a permitted by right use. I don't see any reason why the applicant can't explore potentially making this into a special use permit with specific and objective criteria attached to it, which would cover some concerns I believe you had brought up earlier regarding the fact that once it's a permitted use and it comes before the board's hands are going to be tied. So I think establishing specific and objective criteria will allow the board to determine decibel level for noise, the amount of time, the amount of wedding venues a week or a month, whenever the board wants to put those incremental amounts in. Because as the board knows, and I have not yet had opportunity to see the new plans that council had said they had submitted, but the tent, I believe it was a beer tent, which was part of the wedding use, was in the last proposal probably 10 feet off of the property line of the Frisellas. And that's going to cause a lot of noise, and it's really going to be dependent, too, on how often they're allowed to implement that use, how big that use is going to be, where the parking for that use is going to be. So I don't think that this could be a permitted as of right use without some kind of specific and objective criteria tied to it. That's all for me.
Thank you. Question for Peter. So if you had certain allowances within this special management district, could you then still require that a special use permit be required for one aspect of it?
Yeah, you could. You could require a special use permit for certain uses and not others. But when you make a special use permit use now, you can't have the general standards that used to be for a special use permit, such as, consistent with the area. They'd have to be
Yes, you have to write specific.
very specific criteria.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Just for clarification, that's September 8th.
Thank you.
Is that a Tuesday or a Thursday?
It's the Tuesday after Labor Day.
It is a Tuesday, okay.
It's the day after Labor Day?
All right.
It's the Tuesday after Labor Day, but the council, it's a first Monday and a second Tuesday, so the council isn't getting bumped.
Okay. Next agenda item is Old Tower Hill Road Neighborhood Project, Form-Based Code, review and recommendation to the town council.
So, Madam Chair, I did pass out, or Lynn on my behalf passed out a document this evening that contains two components. It's the letter that you have seen and provided comments on at your last meeting. The second component of that is findings based on a review of the comprehensive community plan. I went back and forth with Andy on text amendments in language last week. He was unavailable due to some out-of-office planned time. So I know the planning board, this is a challenging aspect, that you have things you want to say to the council with regards to your support for the changes, and then there are the requirements under Rhode Island law and conclusions you need to make, and putting those into two separate documents or one document. So the format that I chose at this point in time, and I'm sure when Andy's available he may weigh in or merge them, is a letter, an introductory letter, which references the findings as an addendum or attachment. And then the language contained within the attachment is the actual motion that the planning board would entertain. And in that motion contains language, including the letter introducing the motion. So it's somewhat circular, but it brings your letter and those points you discussed at your last meeting into part of your findings and recommendation to the town council. So it gives you a prelude, and then it gives you the regulatory findings that you're supposed to make under Rhode Island law. Now, Andy may have a way to merge both of those, but I wanted to try and keep it as simple as possible. They're somewhat standalone, but you cannot unconnect them. So.
Are we trying to digest this and approve it tonight?
You have one more meeting that you could undertake this. The only thing I would say is if you have editorial comments, if you can get them to me prior to the next meeting or within the beginning of next week, I could make those editorial changes and then push a clean copy out so that you can vote at your next meeting.
I mean, it is pretty easy to pick out the appropriate goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan within the various elements, and you probably, it looks like you got most of them.
Yeah,
if not all.
again, reading through 200-plus pages and finding the most you could simply reference the town's comprehensive community plan steers you in this direction, and there's a direct reference, I believe, in Objective 3 that in the implementation phase, which is a portion of the comprehensive community plan that was adopted in 2021, towards the end of the plan, directly references the exploration and adoption of a form-based code as a regulatory tool to direct a style and articulation of a particular development pattern you want to see in town.
I mean, I think it's good to have the policy elements and the action items. It's good for not only the council to see, but the members of the public.
Definitely. I like the format of this.
Yes, and having the goals in bold is helpful as well. So would folks like to look at this and send in comments by next week? Yes? Okay.
Can we say Tuesday? Close of
Okay,
business?
everyone got that? Comments
more
by Tuesday, or they won't?
We'll say Tuesday in the same way that you will send things out on a Wednesday or a Thursday before our next meeting. So we'll say Tuesday, but we'll mean Friday.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
If I don't get diverted from my normal workday, I could be beholden to deadlines a little more easier.
Yes.
Sorry.
What-
Lynn does try to keep me on task, which is a challenge, as well as Brian and Curtis and Tracy. Again, I appreciate all the effort that the planning board members have put into the form-based code, all of the workshops you attended, the edits you've made, the PowerPoint presentations you sat through, the conversations with the consultants, the rewrite, the redos, right down to, Jamie, can you move a couple of windows on that rendering to the left and get rid of a few other things here? Thank you, Liz. To even council's members appreciating the fact that we have terminology that references the mill components and aspects of this town and community, which make it more appropriate.
Yeah, the copy that you guys sent out last week, I mean, I think it looks great. It's clear, it's easy to understand. It's a nice document.
Jamie?
I will point out that Lynn reminded me that in the Narragansett Times, I believe this Thursday, and that release will be the official public hearing notice. There's a requirement under Rhode Island law that it appears 3 times in the paper. So it'll appear in this week's edition, next week's edition, and then the second week in September's edition before the scheduled September 14th public hearing. There is a link in that legal advertisement. Also, if you go to the town's webpage this evening, on the front page, front-facing, right-hand side, about halfway down, you will see form-based, Old Tower Hill Road form-based code. You can click on that, and it brings you to the September document. Brian, did I miss something?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate some of the comments that Attorney Tights made 2 weeks ago at this point with this document. Certainly, if people feel that there are things that are critical that need to be said that are missing, or things that are in there that you think absolutely should not be in there, great. We would love to have that constructive criticism, but at this late date, we're not looking for little tweaks and wordsmithing. We're past that. So if there are things that are missing or things that you don't think should be there, get your comments in with some specific edits that you would like to see, not just stream of consciousness thoughts, so that we can get them down and have it ready for vote on the 8th, because that's it.
Great, okay.
If you, to Brian's point, if you don't vote on that next time, you will be holding a special meeting before the 14th. So again, to Brian's point, and
Sure.
Andy stressed that, we would appreciate that. I will let you know, too, we have one more legal aspect we have to handle, and that is notice to the all the property owners within the district, and I believe directly abutting the district.
Okay. 5-minute break before Rich does his presentation? Okay.
summary? Yeah, you want me to pass them out? Sure.
He'll wing it. Oh, jeez. We did it twice. They went right through Verizon and our communications. That's expensive. And I said, what about this? He said, show me the plan. We don't know. It was one of the end posts, so they went deep. They just use a regular sized post, they just go deep a little. And they went right through the wall. Good thing it was ductile iron. It had 2 holes in it, like a vampire bite. Boy, this is bad. When you go to communications, and then it was DOT. It's DOT's work. DOT says, well, we're indemnified. We got to go after DeAmber. DeAmber didn't pay it. We ended up splitting the cost. That was for this one. We haven't heard anything from Costco.
John has not texted me back with a home emergency, so you're all good.
Okay, we're back on. Rich, you're up.
All right, I'm only going to sort of introduce this, and I'm going to let Jim Jeremiah speak on the topic. So every 5 years, we're asked to update our facilities plan dealing with the, as per DEM requirement, with the wastewater system. We do the same thing with the water system as well. This has a little bit of a different process. It does include a public meeting, and that's what we're hoping this is, and it will be. Now, we are actually outdated on this by 20 years. URI was making some improvements. Narragansett was updating their facilities plan. So DEM last year came to me and said, listen, you got to get this thing done. We contracted with Jim Jeremiah to prepare the plan, and just generally speaking, the facilities plan is sort of like a comprehensive plan for the wastewater system. So it includes a discussion, somewhat of an inventory of everything, and also the existing uses, that we see in the wastewater system. And remembering that, and I've spoke to this board before about our wastewater system. We have partners, Narragansett and URI, so it discusses all of the uses across the partnership, and then looks at the potential expansion of the system, a 20-year potential time period of what the population is going to be, and then what some of the potential expansion areas could be. That's not to say we're going to make those improvements, and we're not suggesting that, but it just allows for a place that if funding becomes available, if the community is asking for it, that we could make those improvements. So with that, I'm going to let Jim Jeremia go through the presentation, and then we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jim Jeremia with Jeremia and Associates. Rich took a lot of my speech at the beginning, so I can quickly move through a couple of slides. As Richard indicated, the purpose of a facility plan is to identify the collection system. We're focusing on South Kingston's collection system and the regional plan. So the two elements of this facility plan that we'll be discussing or going over. The idea in a facility plan is to look at a 20-year clip in time to see what's going to happen. And we use the comprehensive plan very extensively to kind of marry the comprehensive plan with the wastewater plan. It is an element, as you know, of the comprehensive plan. We try to mirror both of those. As we go through it, we have a recommendation for the capital improvements. As I said, what I'm going to do this evening is kind of identify two aspects. First, we're going to look at South Kingston and what their wastewater needs are, their collection system, their infrastructure. Then I'm going to look at the regional plan and how it is impacted, both from Narragansett and the University of Rhode Island, because each are a participant in those capital upgrades. But first, we want to focus on South Kingston and where the growth is going to take place. So we looked at, first step in this is to evaluate the existing conditions. Is it adequate to meet the demands of your current flow? Your existing wastewater treatment collection system has been built in the 60s, in the 70s. And that focused around the villages, where you have your dense population, your homes, your commercial establishments. So like in Peacedale and in Wakefield areas, that's where the sewers were developed and continue to manage all your wastewater within that area. So contractually, back in 1969, there was an agreement made between the two communities and the university for capacity. Your contractual capacity is 2.1 million gallons a day. You're currently, and this is based on a 4-year average of wastewater flow, you're about 1 million gallons. So you're under your capacity to treat the wastewater. So as we went through this, we looked at the infrastructure, the interceptors. An interceptor is defined, I look at it as let's take the heart and the major arteries bringing all the blood to the heart. The interceptor is a major artery that brings wastewater from its areas into a pump station and ultimately to the treatment plant. By definition, an interceptor is anything 10 inches and larger in diameter by EPA standard. So we looked at all of those. Your interceptors are more than adequate. It was well designed back at the day. Just as a side note, back when I first started, a long time ago, wastewater used to be based upon like 120 gallons per person per day. We're down to 50 gallons per person per day. So it was really over projected, but that's a good thing because the major infrastructures now are there in place for any future growth without major capital expenditures. There are 2 major pump stations in the town. There are satellite pump stations, but 2 of major concern One is at Kingston Pump Station, near the university. That's your pump station that goes up 138 and then ties into the Silver Lake Pump Station. Silver Lake Pump Station is the major flow that brings all the flow from South Kingston and the university to the treatment plant. If you recall, if you drove up 138 last year or a year ago, we upgraded all of that interceptor. It was leaking, it was broken, and the town funded that upgrade, portions of it paid by the university. We also looked at the future, what is the future flows and how it will affect the interceptors. And that right now, that all your interceptors, all your infrastructure is adequate to handle future flows. So that's a great thing moving forward, that you don't have to look at that. Now, we'll look at the future collection systems. And if you have questions as I'm going through this, please keep this informal and you could ask me anything during the presentation. When we look at future, we look at what I call infill areas. The infill area is you've got your core sewers, and these are lots that are on on ISDS systems that can tie into sewers, or maybe an area like off of Curtis Corner Road. There was a development that went on next to the police station. That was your infrastructure. That's an infill area within your present collection system. It doesn't expand it. It puts the burden on the developer to put all that infrastructure in to tie in to your main collection system. That's what we call infill areas. The next area, there were 3 areas that were identified by Rich's division that people had in the past have shown interest. One was South Road Interceptor. The other one was the Curtis Corner Interceptor, and Saugatucket Pond, or the North Road Sewer. Each one of these, what we did to take each one of these is to look at what the flow would be generated from each of these. So the shaded area that you see on the screen is what the service area as identified by the South Road Interceptor. And the dotted, all the green that you see there, that's your existing infrastructure, all your existing sewers. Your GIS group did a great job in putting these maps together. I'm sure some of them you've seen in your comp plan. Some of these come right out of that comp plan. So as you see, we try to tie into that. So this is an area that potentially could tie into sewers, that there was interest. I've been doing this a while, and there was interest in the past, but as costs grow, we're not sure where it's going to go. It'll really depend on the OWTS systems that they have and the age of those systems, if they need to update it, and if they petition the town for additional to tie into sewers. The next area we looked at was the Saugatucket Pond. The different shaded areas is when we go in to evaluate how we get flow from point A to point B being the existing collection system, we have to break the areas down because of topography. So some areas have pump stations, some areas have gravity sewer. So this was the second area that we looked at. And the final growth area was Curtis Corner Road Interceptor. Again, this is the potential. People have shown interest in it. We want to put these in. The key element to this facility plan is these are projects that in the past people have shown some interest in. If they're in the facility plan and on a state priority list, the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank funding can be used as a portion to finance some of these projects. So it's important to gather as much information as we can to put it in here so that it becomes eligible for state revolving loan. It's very critical. It's a low interest loan, but I got to comment on the town and their funding. Most of the capital projects have been from the reserves, and you have not had to borrow money. in the past for all capital improvements that have gone on. So it's a credit to the town. Believe me, I work with many communities, and they're always struggling for money in capital improvements. But in this community, there is definite conscious effort to maintain that. So once we determined those specific areas, we then broke it down into residential and commercial. So basically, this is just a quick summary of the flows that we anticipate to be coming from that area. And we look at average daily flows. So you're talking about 600,000 gallons of additional flow to the facility. Well, here's a sticker shock. The collection system costs would be over $68 million if you were to take all of those projects on. You need to understand that none of those projects will go on as one, all in one time. Secondly, each one of those areas, like the Curtis Corner Road project or something, may have elements, expansions from that, or a little colored is a specific area away from there to tie into sewers. But not in general. This is a major expenditures. And with the cost of sewers, it has to be considered. The public needs to understand the cost of interceptor sewers in the collection system, because the public will pay an assessment over 20 years. My experience has been that assessments have grown. Back in the day when sewers were first established, it was maybe $6,000 to $10,000. They're in the $25,000 to $40,000 range for assessments to put sewers in. That's expensive. So people have to be aware of it. If a community or a group wants to put sewers in, they need to understand the impact that costs have. Because to say you want sewers, you have to understand all of this, because you don't want to get the project started and then bills go out and everybody starts complaining. Been there, done that. I like to let you know it's going to cost you a lot of money. The sewers, interceptors are expensive. Okay, the next step, now we've established what the flows from South Kingston will be for the regional plant for the next 20 years. So now we're going to look at the regional plant. The regional plant there are three partners, as we've been saying: Narragansett, URI, and South Kingston. The current permit is to manage 5 million gallons a day through that facility. And this agreement has been a long-standing agreement. The original agreement was developed in 1969. South Kingston had 41% of the capacity at the treatment plant. The university had 40%, and Narragansett had 19%. This was built in the late 70s and early 80s. The treatment plant was put in. It's put in the town of Narragansett, so it moves over. But it isn't off of Point Judith Road. In 1997, capital improvements were made at the treatment plant, which allowed the permitted capacity to grow to 5 MGD where it is today. In doing so, there was additional capacity. The University of Rhode Island decided they don't need any more capacity. They're way under their usage. So the capacity was then, the additional capacity was shared by Narragansett and South Kingston. So the current percentage is South Kingston has 42.5%, URI has 33%, and the Narragansett has 24% of the capacity. Now, currently, any capital improvements that go on at the treatment plant, whether it be improvements at the treatment plant or an interceptor, a regional interceptor, this is what dictates the share in capital cost. So if in the case, if it was a treatment plant upgrade, currently there is a couple of upgrades going on. It's about a $2 million project. Narragansett pays 24%, URI pays 33%, and South Kingston pays 42% of that upgrade. Now, in looking at the flows to the wastewater treatment plant, we looked at a 4-year average. We tried to get the last 4 years these are measured values. So the blue represents South Kingston's flow. It's slightly under 1 million gallons for each year. The pink, purple, chartreuse, whatever that bright color is, that's the University of Rhode Island. And the green is Narragansett. And you could see how much Narragansett contributes to the wastewater facility. If you compare the future flows for the university, we now have the 5 MGD, which the first column represents the contractual agreement as of 1997. South Kingston has 2, I'm going to round it, Narragansett 1.2, and the university has 1.65 million gallons of capacity. Taking the 4-year average, you can see that South Kingston, it runs under their contractual flows. Narragansett runs pretty much equal to what their capacity is, and the University of Rhode Island is under it. I need to, while it's not on these screens, Narragansett, when they reach or approach their capacity, they have been leasing flow from the University of Rhode Island. So they're not violating the contract because they're leasing flow from the University of Rhode Island. Because University of Rhode Island is less than a third of their particular flow. So annually, they come up with an agreement, and so they lease flow. At some point in time, the university is going to be developing and needing the capacity. At some point in time, Narragansett acknowledges that they have to stop leasing and they have to invest in hydraulic expansion at the plant. So that's kind of what brought this whole facility plan on. Again, this graph depicts the 4-year average. The orange color is the future flow, and the green is the contractual flow that each one owns at this time. So you can see South Kingston is under their contractual obligation. The university, their flows, they didn't project anything. So we're just using their contractual commitment of flow. The need of the growth here is you can see that that Narragansett, based on their current facility plan that they've just completed, will require additional capacity. They've acknowledged that through the years. That's why they're leasing flow now, but wish to, at some point, purchase it and make a capital investment at the treatment plant. So future average is about 4.93. When we take the max day average, we have a capacity of 5,780,000. So we've got to expand the facility, which will require the Narragansett to purchase hydraulically 800,000 gallons per day. Okay, so once this materializes in 2045, the percentage will be the South Kingston will own 35.9%, Narragansett will own 35.5%, and the university will own 28.6%. The reason, again, this is important, this dictates the capital improvements located at the wastewater treatment facility. So, as I mentioned, we have looked at the facility and have looked at the treatment plant improvements. There's hydraulic improvements, there's process improvements, and what I'll call equipment replacement. It's exceeded its life expectancy and needs to be replaced. So in the hydraulic expansion, what we'll be looking at is adding one more primary clarifier and 2 primary sludge pumps. With process improvements, the focus on these process improvements is twofold. One, to be a good neighbor, and that means odor control. Focusing on the septage receiving. You receive septage waste at 20,000 gallons a day. Septage waste, if you've ever had your system pumped out, you know the smell. Now magnify that every time a hauler dumps 10,000 gallons into the system, it has an odor. So we want to control that odor. We want to make sure it's controlled and we're a good neighbor to the abutting property owners. We want to look at all of the odor-causing areas, which is the septage, sludge, wastewater, that is the solids portion of it. And we want to process more of the wastewater, be able to dispose of it properly. Right now, the state is in a dilemma when it comes to disposal of sludge. The incinerator in Woonsocket has closed, so there's only one place that'll take liquid sludge, and that's the city of Cranston, and they have limited capacity. And then the central landfill, what we call a cake, or it's a more solid, it's 20, 30%. I know. When I try to explain it to people, what do you do for a living? Well, but anyways, it is a thicker, almost like mud, and it'll go to the central landfill where it's buried. So right now, we've got to improve the solids handling so the town has an option to bring their waste somewhere. One community I work in, they put their sludge in a dumpster that goes to Ohio for disposal, because there's no place in Rhode Island. There's limited places. There are limited opportunities to go to the central landfill because they're limited hours. And again, you don't want to create odors over there. So that's the ongoing. That's where the focus is going to be as we, over the next 20 years, look at improving or prioritizing projects at the treatment plant. And finally, the aeration system was put in 97. So its useful life has expired. We need to replace that equipment. That's just a maintenance factor. Again, if the communities, and this is a big assumption on my part, when all the 2 communities and the university get together and agree that to move forward with these flows, that is the percentage of what people will pay moving forward. So what I did here is the total project is estimated, if we did everything all at once, in today's dollars, it's about $24 million. We know it's going to happen in phases. It's not going to happen all at once. But the various costs are broken down on this chart. You can see that the cost associated with the town of Narragansett is higher than the other 2 because they're responsible for the hydraulic upgrade for the primary clarifiers, because they're asking for more than their original commitment the revised commitment in 97. So moving forward, the communities have to agree upon what that is. Now, all of the flows that I use for the town of Narragansett in our facility plan is based upon their facility plan, which DM has just approved. So this is, the town does not generate or project their needs. But Narragansett, just as a summary, all of their wastewater comes from the center of the town and the northern end. All of the wastewater there is generated and pumped to the treatment plant at South Kingston. So, as I said, Narragansett will be responsible for the hydraulic expansion. All of the participants will be responsible for the upgrades both process and replacement. And the operating cost, though, is clear to understand it's based on what they actually give you annually. So if the annual flow is sometimes less than the committed flow, that's what they pay on an annual basis. South Kingston, the wastewater superintendent, monitors all the flows from all the areas, and at the end of each quarter, a bill goes out as you would if you were on sewers. You would receive a bill, they receive a similar bill. In conclusion, what we're trying to do with this facility plan is match up with the town's comprehensive plan, build a strategy for wastewater for the next 20 years, and try to meet the future regulations. We kind of match what regulations DM is having or projecting to be used. Right now, your treatment plant is considered a secondary plant. There is no requirement for nutrient removal. You have an ocean discharge. Your discharge, if you care to know, if you go by Monahan's, it goes out about a mile and discharges out. And every year, every couple of years, the outfall is inspected to make sure the structural integrity is still there, and it is. So we've just done that report. So and the next step would be is any questions that you have, you can submit it to Rich. I'll address it in the facility plan, or any questions now, we can answer them. And then we'll submit the plan, the draft to DEM. They'll review it, they'll make their comments, and in that time, the participants will get together and see if they can come to an agreement on what the flows are going to be in the future.
Thank you. A couple of questions.
Sure.
So the $24 million, that was for future operating expenses?
No, that was for capital improvements.
Okay. And then the $68.7 million for the collection system, that's something else?
That's yes. That's just South Kingston's cost if you plan to completely service those 3 areas we identified.
And does every community go through this process and
Yes.
come up with?
Yes, they do.
I would suggest that we send all of this information to our representatives in the General Assembly and to the leadership of the General Assembly and to the governor, so that they would be much more aware of the costs as they continue to send forward legislation that impacts this. And then the other question is, when you look at all of this, do you integrate this at all with our hazard mitigation plan so that in the event?
I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't touch on it because it's a small portion, but part of this facility plan looks at resiliency. So we took into account the pump stations that are impacted. Right now, the Middlebridge pump stations, or Treaty Rock, whatever you want to call them, there are 2 pump stations there. Both pump stations have been upgraded to meet the current resiliency, and that is storm tool plus sea level rise. Okay? South Kingston, the town is currently in a project, is the South Silver Lake Pump Station. While I don't agree with this number, the FEMA flood has it at grade. If you've been to the Silver Lake Pump Station or Silver Lake Avenue, it's at grade. Storm Tool has it 5 feet higher than that. So we have to comply with Storm Tool. And so there is provisions that we will waterproof the first 5 feet of the brick and put flood planks along there. So, and the last one to do is the hospital pump station. It's behind the X-ray and radiation, that small building on the side. I don't forget the street.
But the actual construction in Silver Lake is being done now as part of another project that we're working on. We just rolled it right into some work we were doing at Silver Lake just to get it done and get it out of the way.
So
Great. Any other questions for anyone? Do we need a motion to send this or to the council? Is it just a matter of them making the presentation?
So we'll be, once this is going to go to DEM for a review and approval.
Yeah.
Once they approve it, it's got to go to the council for a public hearing.
Okay.
And then they'll adopt it, or maybe they'll adopt it. But that'll take, that'll be a public hearing, public notice, everything. So at that point, it'll be a more widely known.
Great. Thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you. I know it's not the most attractive.
Oh, we understand the connection.
Oh, yeah.
From
It's very
our
important. I
perspective.
mean, I lived in town for the first 20 years, and so I realized the septic system, and as soon as I moved out, they put sewers down.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So our last couple items on the agenda, report of administrative officer.
I have nothing substantial new to report.
And then I know that some members have had some concerns about the most recent packet, so to speak, that was sent out electronically that was in many ways unreadable, very difficult. We need to find something in between that and the packets that we used to get, because it was 500 and something pages of just like one merging into another. It didn't seem like it was separate. It was, I don't know if anyone else has any. I know Paul won't have a problem with this, but, because you're a computer geek. But
I tried to open it Saturday, and my laptop was indicating it was going to take hours to download it. I canceled twice, gave up trying. Today, it did download quickly, so I don't know if something changed between Saturday and today, and that's beyond my capabilities of describing. But to get a 536-page document that I'm supposed to review in a couple of days, I mean, I know $40 a meeting is a lot of money, but this is kind of over the top. That's so much of my personal time. I'm expected to look at that much? I think...
Just a suggestion. I mean, I'm not even sure I saw the email, but I just go to the website, right? Go to the agenda, go to download meeting materials. Everything's right there. The link is there for YouTube. If it's a town, it just, I don't know. I think everything's there if you look in the right place for it.
So did you read 536 pages?
No. Well, I mean,
Of course not.
I looked through everything that was on the agenda. There was not 536 pages of material.
There was.
Well,
There was.
What we got.
Yeah.
The problem, though, is that repeats everything we've had in the past. I started to scroll through it. It was hard to read because it was so small, but I recognized that a lot of what was there is stuff that we've already had in the past. So it's a repeat of all the documents, for a lengthy period of time, and we only really need to read the updated material that we used to get.
not everybody wants to look at, or it's not easy to look at maps or write comments down if you're looking at something online. And not everybody wants to bring their laptop to the meeting because it's kind of impersonal when you're talking to the public. I mean, you guys all have them, but your staff, so that's okay.
Yeah, nothing.
I
Unless it's
just,
in my spam folder.
Susan?
I mean, I
Well,
just go
that's what
here.
I tried to open, and it was ridiculous.
What they said, and for me, that document, if it had been this project and then this other project in two separate documents, I can bite that off and tackle one. But when I went to move from one project to the other, I had to start scrolling to see where did one end and the next begin. And there was no way to find where this project ended and that one began. And I missed Rich's whole, if there was stormwater stuff, I just missed that whole part. So if it was divided into compartments, I think it would have been easier. And then also somehow highlighted what's the new stuff, because we have seen all of these projects before. To know what the new stuff is, so that we could just go straight to that, is useful to me.
So, Madam Chair, the only thing we can do is talk to IT, but we're bundled in with the town's agenda software packaging. So. Is that how council gets it too? 500 pages? They're in the same software, agenda, packaging, and formatting.
It's different when you're looking at plans and when you're looking, you know what I mean?
We're in the same agenda software package that all planning, all commissions and boards are under. We can have the conversation with IT to see if there are any options.
Please, yes, and let us know, and
What I find challenging with when there's a series of plans, it's impossible to look at them simultaneously. Well, it's not impossible. You take your laptop and sit down next to somebody else's computer, but it's hard.
yeah, I know, I've done that.
And again, it's further complicated by the fact that the state decided to go to electronic permitting, and applicants just download documents with their names on them, not our names on them. Curtis and Brian do a good job of renaming some things so that you can follow them, but again, we're being put in a box. So
Jamie,
we'll
can
look
you-
at, see if we have any options.
Can you pull up the agendas and minutes page? Because I see at the top of the agendas and minutes page, you've got the agenda packet PDF, which is, again, 500 some odd pages just. But then underneath that, we've got all the individual documents for the meeting. So they're all there,
That's easier.
You used to be able to click on individual
and you can.
links. So you
So you're
still
saying
can.
go to the town's website?
Yeah, if you just go to the agendas and minutes.
Use the clerk link.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to look at a 530-page PDF either, but I mean, if that's the system, that's the system, but there is a way around it.
And then I think we still have the option, if there's some specific project that we want to have a hard copy for, especially things like motions that we
Yes.
might be changing on the fly. Okay. Duty member for next TRC meeting, which is when? September.
Unless someone's
September
dying, unless someone's dying to do it, I will take it.
September 9th.
Maria, you had Mr. Jordan volunteering?
Unless someone is dying to do it, I'd be happy to do it.
Great, thank you.
I'm working at the polls that day.
Okay.
That's primary day.
Um,
Are you open on primary day?
Oh,
September 9th?
Yeah.
It's
Town
primary
hall's
day.
open.
Right. You're having meetings too. But I'm working.
just one quick thought, once we get past the, hopefully in a positive fashion, the form-based code, one of the things that has been on our list for a long time is taking another look at the 108 Special Management District. And I was reminded of that because we've had recent things come up, and board members may recall when Dollar General came in, we had a lot of interest from the public because there are quite a few subdivisions in that area. And when you look at the special management district for that area, there's a lot in there that needs to be done, both in terms of what's in the comprehensive plan and from folks who came out with regard to pedestrian safety, and just kind of an update of that plan, because it was done so long ago and it was never really completed, and we didn't have, what, 7, 8 different subdivisions in that area. And some of those things did come out when people came out for the Dollar General, yeah. So something to really think about putting on our list,
Crosswalks,
let
too.
alone the traffic, and that, you know, it's the major route to URI.
Well, can we add architectural standards to that conversation?
Well, that should be part of it, right?
Yeah.
We've been talking about lack of standards, and we were just fortunate with Dollar General that they listened to our recommendations and came out with a great result. But as you can see, that's not always the case. So, anyway, something to think about. Thank you. Motion from Paul, second. Susan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.